Aloha and welcome to Hawaii to PTC 23. I'm Joe-Marc Lima, editor of the Tech Capital, and here with me I've got Ayotunde Coker, CEO of Open Access Data Centers and chairman of the African Data Centers Association. Ayotunde, it's a pleasure to finally see you and speaking to you after all these years.
Yes, great
not
to be
my
here.
choice, kind of imposed by the world.
We've had COVID in between somewhere, yeah.
But I mean, despite all that, the market has not stopped. You've got a new job. You came from an incredible venture. You're now joined into an even more incredible venture because it's a Pan-African venture. Before we get into what you're doing, let's talk about the market conditions in Africa. So how has the market changed and behaved over the last, I mean, we haven't chat for 3 years, so I'm going to ask the last 3 years.
Yes. Incredible momentum being built in the market for actually digital infrastructure, not just data centers, connectivity and data centers. You know, typically South Africa has been that anchor point of scale. You know, research done by companies like Zalaman Analytics and so on showed that South Africa had about just over 50% of the entire African data center footprint, okay? It's continuing to grow, but markets like Kenya and Nigeria are really starting to bring in scale. You've got companies in Nigeria now expanding. We've had entrance of global players in Digital Realty Trust. Equinix, well publicized over the last 18 months, which kind of shown Vantage in South Africa, and Vantage is growing significantly in South Africa. You know, so it's that's sort of shown the light on Africa as a growth region in the world, because these guys don't make moves like that without the assessments, the analysis, the returns they expect. They do their homework, you know, and so established players also therefore still have the opportunity to grow, you know. So it's a good mix, and it's raised, I guess, you know, rising tide raises all boats, and that's sort of done that over the last 3 years. If you look at the Lagos locale, for instance, in Nigeria, it's what installed base of about 8 megawatts right now, 9 megawatts thereabouts, but there's about 40 to 50 megawatts of construction, data center construction going on right now to be available in the next 12 to 36 months time scale. That's a significant scale. Yeah. In East Africa, you've got IX Africa has gone pretty much going live now with a 1 megawatt footprint in a 4.5 megawatt first phase, and they're talking about 18 megawatts beyond that. You have other players like Africa Data Centers expanding across Africa. Open Access Data Centers, which I run now, is growing significantly across Africa. So there's a lot of growth that's happened and momentum in the last 3 years just in data centers. Morocco is growing, N+1 in Morocco. You've got Raxio growing across Africa. So there's been, and this is all happening at pace. 1.3 billion population, about
3 billion in the next few decades.
It will be, yes. And about 600 million connected to the internet. But you have hotspots like South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya. If you look at Nigeria, we've got broadband connectivity. 80 million of the population are connected to broadband. 155 million are connected to the internet. That's the kind of scale we're talking about. So if you look at 80 million connected to broadband, that's bigger than the entire population of the UK or Italy or Germany. Right? Yeah. And that's people connected to the broadband. So the scale is there. Then if you look at connectivity, you've got much more undersea cable connectivity coming in. You've got Equiano launching on the Atlantic coast of Africa's landed in Lagos. Namibia landed in Cape Town. We've landed Equiano in Lagos, Open Access Data Centers. We've landed Equiano into Cape Town. We're expanding into Kinshasa, and I'll talk about that when we talk about OADC. On the eastern seaboard, you have 2 Africa coming in over the next 12 months or so, landing at various points, Mogadishu, in Kenya, in Mozambique, right down to Durban, where we land to Africa in Durban, and broadband penetration away from the undersea cables around the coast is increasing significantly. So there's access to broadband, and therefore digital infrastructure, and therefore the demand for data centers has grown significantly over the last 3 years.
Just on the investment side of things, so there are a lot of challenges happening since last year, and this year it's also going to be quite challenging, if not at least outside of the digital infrastructure space. Is demand in Africa right now going to be enough to ensure a healthy 2023 on the investment and financing side of the sector in Africa? So basically, is demand going to be enough to overcome recessions and interest rates and market caps and all that?
Okay, from where we are now, I can say, yes, the investors actually see a huge upside in investment in digital infrastructure in Africa. Else we wouldn't be having the finance to build these data centers. The Wire Group, for instance, secured over 200 million to expand digital infrastructure in Africa. So that's a testament to that. The investment with the IFC that we announced a few months ago, taking a stake in the company, and you have investors coming in, investing and building data centers right across the continent. So the example I gave of the growth of the last 3 years wouldn't happen without investor activity. And going forward, there's an upside that's seen. I'm actually going to be at the TMT World Congress next week in London. We're sponsoring the Africa session there, and I'll get a much better up-to-date insight of investor sentiment at that point in time. But the trajectory is a very, very strong positive trajectory for investing in Africa. You see, democracy is changing Africa. Better governance is coming in. People are increasingly making a stand and expectation of better governance. And people who've been to Africa, anywhere in the world, you have idiosyncrasies in the locations you're in. The difference in culture from, the UK to France, for instance, as an example, and to Germany, you have to be conscious of those idiosyncrasies and how you operate in it, how you would operate in Asia, in India, in China. It's the same thing with Africa. Africa has over 50 countries, 54 countries, 3 main sort of different languages: English, French, Lusophone countries. Even within countries, they're diverse. So people who have the international experience know that you've got to understand the idiosyncrasies of the environment you're in. And once you do that and you do the right thing, then you'll succeed. In some countries we just don't go in bare vanilla. We go in with the right JV partnerships. We go in with the people who understand have the relationships within the country. And also in Africa, if you're known as being someone who operates with ethics, you do things right, you do the right things,
you go far.
You'll go far, and you're respected for it. And if things don't happen when you hold those values, then walk away from it. It's perfectly okay. And so the impression that feels that you've got to get into muddy waters and stuff like that, it's for people who want to do that. By and large, if you have the reputation of ethics, doing the right things, doing things right, people see you coming, they know you for that, and that's how they'll engage with you.
Well, speaking of reputation, someone with a good reputation is yourself, and you're now heading open access data centers, which is quite a new venture. It's a year and a half old. Talk us through the company and what are the plans? What's the pipeline? What is the goal?
Yeah, Open Access Data Centers is 100% owned by WIOC, the Wire Group. WIOC in itself has been operating for the last 14 years or so, building out open, hyperscale, wholesale connectivity across the continent. So it connects the continent. It connects the continent to the world with POPs in Marseille and Portugal and London, and long-distance networks across South Africa, more in the southern Africa, expanding in Nigeria with its networks. So the data center business and that a plan was a natural extension of the WIOC value proposition of open digital infrastructure. It's been, some years in the making, but with the funding coming in the last 18 months, it's really accelerated the process of implementation of data centers across the continent. So we have, if you look at Southern Africa, where we've made a lot of progress, we have a facility in Durban, which is a large facility, 5-10 megawatts growth potential. The Two Africa is going to be landing into that. We have, as in KwaZulu-Natal, in Johannesburg, we've launched a facility last October, and that's growing very, very well. We're pleased with that progress there in Isando, in Joburg. We have another Joburg facility coming in later this year. In Cape Town, we have a facility in Rondebosch that's landed the Equiano cable there. Another one being built, ready this quarter in Brackenfell. And we have 28 edge data centers in South Africa.
Which is quite a healthy network.
Yeah, you see, this is going to be it is actually a great anchor point for delivery of 5G services and so on out across the board. This is very much of a core to edge strategy we have. So you have those core data centers I talked about in Cape Town, Johannesburg, Durban, and they link out around our long distance networks as well to the points of use across the country. So we aggregate the ISPs at points of use. They focus on gathering the eyeballs. We give them digital infrastructure to host on. Go to Nigeria, and we have a facility in Nigeria which is a flagship. It's live now. It landed the Equiano cable earlier last year in Lagos. About 900 kilowatts of IT capacity now, expanding to 1.2 meg in just the next 3 months or so, and we're building well on the way to building over 12 megawatts in that location there, building a great ecosystem as well. And Kinshasa, we're launching Kinshasa in the next 8 weeks. It's a 500 kilowatt facility, growth potential to 5 megawatts. We're unlocking the opportunity in the Congo. Actually, it's a market that has an incredible amount of potential, and that's an incredible amount of progress in just 18 months. And we're looking at other countries around Southern Africa, around East Africa, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, on the mark. You see, our customers are seeing great value in this combined proposition of open connectivity and carrier-neutral open access data centers. And they want to talk to us about that converged opportunity on how we can actually deliver digital infrastructure. Now, from a continent point of view, we're impacting economies we go into, because with broadband connectivity, every 10%, 10% penetration of broadband brings about 2% growth in GDP. And the data centers, every 10 million you put into a data center can give you 100 to 300 million impact, systemic impact, either direct or induced impact in the economies you're in. So we're making a huge, and for me it's a very important thing, that we're making a huge impact in the economies we're establishing to bring about connectivity, digital infrastructure. You actually affect the communities in such a way that, internet access, education, commerce, efficiencies in the communities. And every facility we build to the highest standards of expectation. With some of the edge facilities, we tier them tier 1, 2, 3, depending on the kind of facilities you have, the cooling you have, the availability you have, if you have gens and stuff like that and so on. It's the reality of building edge infrastructure. And it's pretty exciting, actually, in how you can then drive delivery of digital infrastructure to the point of use.
Maybe a very simplistic question, and it doesn't require a very long answer. It's probably going to be a no answer. How many megawatts you are going to have, or gigawatts, by the end of the decade? In 2030, how big is the portfolio going to be?
Oh, by 2030. So if you look at the projection that we're having in the different locales, we're looking down, we're 2023 now, 7 years down the line. We'd probably have about 100 megawatts in our portfolio.
Okay, and that's only the beginning, I guess, then. It will grow a lot more than that.
Yes, Okay. We've got, we're building out not just Lagos in Nigeria, but many locations in Nigeria, at least 10. And typically you see these larger edge data centers coming around about 500 kilowatts of capacity. The smaller edge of, say, 50 racks will give you around about 150 of capacity, because you're at the typically 3 kilowatts per rack, because of the ISP aggregation and stuff like that. The larger ones have significantly higher density. So in just one country, we're seeing the fact that we'll probably have just about 20 megawatts or more. And when you look at the footprint we're bringing in, we will be bringing in elsewhere. 100 megawatts actually in our portfolio is a very modest expectation of growth.
Yeah, which seems to be the narrative across the entire industry, across the world. It's never enough. And then, so chairman of the African Data Center Association as well, give us a very brief overview of 2023 for the ADC.
Yeah, much has happened since we had that launch in Marrakesh.
It's been a long
2018.
time. Orange juice.
Yes, but we've made a lot of progress in that. It's great to see the industry come together. You leave your business at the door. We come together. We have a great board on the ADCA, and we're passionate about how we grow the industry in Africa. And we've made tremendous progress. We have over 40 members right now across the board. The large data center companies, the smaller data center companies. You have the supply chain membership coming in. We've very strong governance. We have an AGM coming up soon. I've been chairman of that for the last 2 years. Very proud that the first chairman was an iconic lady in Fatoumata Sarr, great industry, a role model for ladies in the industry. And, so we've made significant amount of progress. We've had initiatives with respect with Oxford Business Group, for instance, with Xalam Analytics, looking at the dynamics of the African continent. The stretch of what we have to deal with is a huge continent. The scale of Africa is significant. And if you fly north to south, it's a 10, 12-hour flight, or east to west, right?
Which is a mistake a lot of people make. People talk about Africa as if it was one thing. No, it's 53, 54 continents. 54
countries, yes.
Hundreds of different cultures, dozens of different languages. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
It's not, and it's large. I mean, it's you get on the plane, it's a 5-hour flight to somewhere, right? So it's large. So we've been able to bring the continent together. We have representatives from the Southern Africa, from Eastern Africa, from Northern Africa, from Western Africa, West Central Africa on the board and in the membership. We've had initiatives as Build in Africa, which is getting good momentum. And also a stand around sustainable digital infrastructure in Africa. There's a lot of hydro, solar, gas, green opportunities for generating energy in Africa. So we set out that momentum and awareness on what do we do to drive awareness on sustainability and get execution around the sustainability agenda. ADCA itself is part of the Climate Accord, the IMISON's Climate Accord. OADC itself, actually, as a company, is as well. Build with Africa means that we bring the supply chains to Africa as much as possible, to the Africa regions, in Western Africa, Eastern Africa. Build what you use locally. It means that you save on shipping right across the continent. We need to streamline supply chain by making sure complexity of HS codes in importing materials into the continent to build data centers and digital infrastructure is uncomplicated in a way, as a verb. And bring as much as you can to local economies
economy, yeah.
to build. So, and we set an agenda that's right for Africa. So we've made a lot of progress over the last 4 to 5 years or so. We have a great MD, Paul Francois Cartier.
It's been a while since I spoke to him.
Yes, you know, and it's really very fortunate to have someone of that caliber as an MD. And, you know, we model around best practices of what's happened elsewhere with, you know, the European Data Center Association, for instance. You know, we partner with the Dutch Data Center Association to create this sort of vibrant ecosystem of digital infrastructure in Africa, focused on data centers. But, you know, you can't really just look at data centers without thinking of digital infrastructure. Yeah, it's a whole ecosystem, yes.
Yeah. I think it's very like out of the box thinking, the fact that you're actually trying to also build the manufacturing side, the circular economy around this. That's very interesting. It's a very interesting aspect. I was going to ask, because I mean, we are in Hawaii. I know we cannot film the view in the background because it's too sunny. That's a good problem to have. But it's a beautiful view. If you had to describe this conference in one word, what does this conference mean to you in one word?
It's a melting pot of the world in the same place for a few days. In January, it sets the tone for the year. You know, PTCs have been like that. It's a long way to come. Crazy time zone, 11, 12, 15 hours from.
You can switch off.
You can be here, right?
You can be present.
And it's back to back. You're in conversations, meetings back to back, really getting to touch base with your existing relationships, build new relationships, catch up, set up, you know, get things moving, get to understand the trends that are happening on a one-to-one basis or one-to-many basis. It's PTC. It's really in a positive way, bit of a industry jamboree, really. Yes.
Okay. Ayotunde Coker, thank you so much for talking to me. It's been a pleasure.
I will do this again. See you again.
As for your home, thank you for watching, and do check our website for more exclusive content from PTC 23. Until next time, mahalo.